The cameras kept rolling, but in that moment, Steve Harvey made a decision that broke every rule of television. He turned the control booth and said 4 words that would change everything. Turn off the lights. What happened next in that darkened studio wasn't just television anymore. It was the moment when a 16-year-old boy who had spent his entire life trying to disappear finally found someone who saw him. It was a Wednesday afternoon at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. The energy was electric, as it always was during taping. 2 families stood at their podiums, the Chen family from San Francisco and the Williams family from Detroit. The setup was standard, the questions were ready, and Steve Harvey was in his element, working the crowd with that infectious smile and perfect timing that had made him America's favorite game show host. But in the Chen family lineup, something was different. While the other 4 family members chatted excitedly among themselves, 16-year-old Alex Chen stood at the far end of the podium, his shoulders hunched inward, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. He wore a navy blue button-down shirt that his mother had picked out for him, and dark jeans that he kept pulling nervously. His black hair fell across his forehead, creating a shield between him and the bright studio lights. Steve had noticed Alex immediately during the family introductions, but not for the usual reasons. In his decades of hosting, Steve had developed an instinct for reading people. He could spot the natural comedians, the competitive spirits, the nervous first-timers. But Alex was something different. Alex was trying to become invisible. "And who do we have here?" Steve had asked during the introductions, working his way down the Chen family line with his trademark warmth. "This is our son, Alex," Mrs. Linda Chen had answered quickly, her voice carrying just a hint of apology. "He's 16, honor roll student, very smart." Steve had looked directly at Alex, waiting for the boy to make eye contact, to smile, to give him something to work with. But Alex had only nodded slightly, his gaze never leaving a spot on the studio floor about 3 feet in front of him. "Alex, what do you like to do for fun?" Steve had pressed gently, the way he always did with quieter contestants. The pause that followed was painful. The studio audience waited. The cameras waited. Alex's family waited. Finally, Mrs. Chen answered for him. "He likes computers and reading." Steve had moved on, but something about that interaction stuck with him. It wasn't just shyness. He'd seen shy contestants before. This was something deeper, something that looked like fear. The game progressed normally for the first 2 rounds. The Chen family was actually doing well, with Alex's father David and his older sister Sarah providing solid answers, but Alex hadn't spoken once. When it was his turn at the buzzer, he would step back and let other family members take over. When Steve cracked jokes, Alex would flinch slightly, as if the attention physically hurt him. It was during the 3rd round that everything changed. The question was innocent enough. Name something that makes you feel confident. Sarah had just given the number 1 answer, looking good, and the Chen family was celebrating their chance to play for points. The studio audience was clapping, the lights were flashing, and the energy was building toward what should have been the highlight of the show. But Steve noticed something that made his smile falter. While everyone else was celebrating, Alex was backing away from the podium. Not just stepping back, he was retreating, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow, his hands shaking visibly. Steve's comedian instincts told him to keep the energy up, to move to the next family member, to maintain the pace that made good television. But his human instincts told him something else entirely. This wasn't stage fright. This was panic. "Hold up," Steve said suddenly, his voice cutting through the celebration. The music stopped. The audience fell silent. Even his own family stopped cheering and turned to look at Alex, who was now pressed against the back wall of the stage area, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Steve handed his cards to Sarah and walked directly to Alex. As he got closer, He could see that the boy was in full panic mode. His face was pale, his eyes were wide with terror, and he was hyperventilating. "Alex," Steve said softly, approaching slowly like you might approach a frightened animal. "Hey, son, look at me." But Alex couldn't look at him. His eyes were darting frantically around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the bright lights, and Steve could see that every element of the television environment was overwhelming him. That's when Steve Harvey made the decision that would define not just this episode, but his entire understanding of what his role as a host really meant. "Stop everything," Steve called out to the production booth, his voice carrying across the studio with absolute authority. "Cut the music. Cut the lights. Stop the cameras." The producers in the control room exchanged panicked glances. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how television worked, but something in Steve's voice made them comply. One by one, the studio lights dimmed. The cameras stopped rolling. The audience fell into complete silence. In the sudden dimness, Steve turned back to Alex, who was still pressed against the wall, still struggling to breathe. "Alex," Steve said, his voice now stripped of all performance, all entertainment value. "I need you to listen to my voice, just my voice. Can you do that?" Alex's breathing was still rapid, but Steve could see him trying to focus. "Good," Steve continued, moving closer, but not close enough to feel threatening. "Now, I want you to know something. Those cameras, they're off. Those lights, they're off. That audience, they can't even see us right now. It's just you and me talking in the dark." For the first time since he'd walked onto the stage, Alex lifted his eyes and looked directly at Steve. "There you are," Steve said, with a gentle smile. "There's the young man I've been trying to meet." Behind the scenes, the production crew watched in fascination and concern. This was completely unprecedented. They were losing valuable taping time, throwing off the entire schedule. But none of them dared to interrupt what was happening on that darkened stage. "Alex," Steve said, now speaking in the tone he used with his own children, not his television voice, but his father voice. "What's happening right now? Talk to me." Alex's breathing was starting to slow, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. I can't do this. All these people watching me. The cameras. I feel like I can't breathe." Steve nodded with understanding. "You know what? That's okay. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But I want to tell you something that might help." He moved closer to Alex, close enough that his voice wouldn't carry to the silent audience. "You see all these people out there in the dark? The crew, the audience, your family? Every single one of them has felt exactly what you're feeling right now. That fear of being seen, of being judged, of not being good enough. You know what the difference is between you and them?" Alex shook his head. "You're brave enough to admit it," Steve said. "Most people spend their whole lives pretending they're not scared. You're honest about it. That's not weakness, son. That's courage." The studio remained in darkness, but something was shifting in Alex's posture. His shoulders weren't as hunched. His breathing was more regular. "Alex," Steve continued, "I want to make you a deal. We can end this right here if you want. You and your family can walk away, no questions asked, no judgment from anyone. Or," he paused, letting the word hang in the air, "or we can try something different, something that's never been done on this show before." Alex looked at him with curiosity for the first time. "What if we kept it just like this? What if we played the game in the dark, just the families and me? No bright lights, no cameras rolling, just people talking to people. Would you be willing to try that?" The question hung in the darkness for a long moment. Then, so quietly that only Steve could hear him, Alex whispered, "Maybe." Steve smiled and turned toward where he knew the Chen family was standing. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Sarah, David Jr. "I need to ask you something." Would you be willing to try something completely different? Would you be willing to play this game in a way that helps Alex feel safe? The response was immediate. Whatever Alex needs, came Linda Chen's voice from the darkness. Steve then turned toward the Williams family. Williams family, I know this isn't what you signed up for, but would you be willing to be part of something special here? Absolutely, came the reply from the Williams patriarch. We're all family here. What happened next was unlike anything in game show history. Steve Harvey conducted an entire Family Feud game in Dear Darkness, with the studio lights dimmed to almost nothing, and the cameras off. The questions continued, but the atmosphere was completely transformed. It wasn't television anymore. It was just people talking, laughing, and connecting in the most genuine way possible. And Alex began to participate. It started small. When the question was name something you do when you're nervous, Alex whispered his answer to his sister Sarah, who then repeated it aloud. Avoid eye contact. It was the number 3 answer on the board, and when the family celebrated, Alex actually smiled. By the 4th round, Alex was answering questions directly, his voice growing stronger in the darkness. When Steve asked, name something that takes courage, Alex's answer came clear and confident. Being yourself. It was the number 1 answer. The audience, sitting in darkness, had become completely invested in this unprecedented moment. They could hear Alex's voice growing stronger with each answer, could feel his confidence building. When he got answers right, their applause was different, not the typical game show cheering, but something deeper, more genuine, like they were celebrating a personal victory. But the most powerful moment came during Fast Money. Alex had volunteered to go first, something that would have been unimaginable when the lights were on. Steve stood next to him in the darkness, asking the 5 questions that would determine whether the Chen family won the Name something people are afraid of, Steve said. Being judged, Alex answered without hesitation. Name something that makes you feel brave. Having someone believe in you. Name something you do in the dark that you can't do in the light. Alex paused, and when he answered, his voice was stronger than it had been all day. Tell the truth. By the end of Fast Money, Alex had scored 127 points. His mother went second and need only 73 more points to win. She got them easily, but when the family celebrated their victory, the real celebration was for Alex. Steve waited for the cheering to die down, then called Alex over to center stage. Alex, he said, I want you to know something. What happened here today, what you did, that wasn't about a game show. That was about finding your voice. And let me tell you something. You have a powerful voice. Don't ever let anyone convince you to keep it quiet. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. This has my personal number on it, he said, pressing it into Alex's hand. Not for publicity, not for show business. If you ever need someone to remind you how brave you are, you call me. But Steve wasn't finished. He removed his suit jacket and draped it over Alex's shoulders, just as he had done in countless other moments of connection with contestants. This jacket has been with me through thousands of shows, Steve said. It's seen a lot of moments, but none more important than this one. Because today, you reminded everyone in this studio, including me, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit you're scared and ask for help. The studio lights came back up slowly, like dawn breaking. The cameras resumed rolling, but something fundamental had changed. Alex stood in the center of the stage, wearing Steve's jacket, no longer trying to disappear. His family surrounded him, not with pity or embarrassment, but with pride. The Williams family, who had just lost the game, came across the stage to congratulate not just the Chen family, but Alex specifically. You're inspiring, young man, the Williams grandfather told him. You showed us what real courage looks like. As the episode wrapped up, Steve addressed the camera directly, but his words were really for Alex and anyone else watching who had ever felt invisible Sometimes we think courage means not being afraid, he said. But real courage is being afraid and showing up anyway. Real courage is asking for what you need. Real courage is letting people see you, even when you're scared they won't like what they see. He paused, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this and you feel like Alex felt today, scared, invisible, like you don't belong, I want you to know something. You belong. Your voice matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to turn off the lights so you can find your way to turn them back on. The episode aired 3 months later and became one of the most watched in Family Feud history. Not because of dramatic gameplay or funny answers, but because viewers recognized something authentic in an increasingly manufactured world. Alex Chen didn't become a television personality or a motivational speaker. He went back to his high school in San Francisco. But he was different. He joined the debate team. He started a support group for students with social anxiety. He learned that his experience on Family Feud had given him something valuable, the knowledge that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Steve Harvey kept his promise. When Alex called him 6 months later, struggling with the pressure of college applications and worried about interviews, Steve didn't just offer advice. He offered to help. Through Steve's foundation, Alex received mentorship and support that helped him not just get into college, but thrive there. The jacket Steve gave Alex still hangs in his dorm room at Stanford University, where he's studying psychology, with a focus on anxiety disorders. He wants to help other people find their voices, the way Steve helped him find his. And Steve, he learned something that day that changed how he approached every show, every contestant, every moment he spent in front of those cameras. He learned that sometimes the most important thing a host can do is stop hosting and start being human. The darkened studio that day became a metaphor for something larger. The idea that sometimes we have to eliminate the distractions, the pressures, the fears of being judged, in order to find our authentic selves. Steve Harvey had created a safe space where a frightened teenager could discover that his voice mattered. Years later, in interviews, Steve would refer to that episode as one of the most important of his career. Not because it was good television, though it was, but because it reminded him why he did what he did. My job isn't to entertain people, he would say. My job is to help people feel seen, heard, and valued. Everything else is just details. The episode with Alex sparked conversations in homes across America about anxiety, about the pressure young people face, about the importance of creating safe spaces for those who struggle to find their voice. Schools began implementing programs based on the lights off concept, creating low-pressure environments where students could participate without the fear of judgment. Alex's story became a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to try despite the fear. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to meet you in the darkness to help you find your light. The invisible child had become visible, not by changing who he was, but by finding someone who saw his worth exactly as he was. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices, Steve Harvey and Alex Chen proved that sometimes the most powerful moments happen in whispers, in darkness, in the quiet spaces where real connection can finally take root. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten, because sometimes the most important thing we can do is turn off the lights so someone else can shine.